Sorry, thank you, Frank. Okay, now, thank you. We're recording the minutes, the meeting from Monday, June 8th, 2020 of the Community Connectivity Grant Committee. Meeting was called to order at 1:05. Present are Tim Griswold, Frank Pappalardo, Eric, myself, Jim Lampost, and Curt from BSC. And Jesse Harris will be joining us. Bonnie Ream-Snyder will not be joining us. We had a quorum present to approve the minutes. Frank made the motion and it was seconded by Eric. We all approved, and after the approval, Jim Lampost joined us and concurred. All right. Thank you, Frank. Go ahead. I'm sorry to have interrupted you, Curt.
Oh, no worries at all. And Jim, just I mentioned this before. My camera is broken, which is why you can't see me. So maybe that's a good thing. So really, last time, if you recall, we had talked about the one remaining piece for the Harford Avenue portion of the design was the work that involved the homeowners. And we had talked about really, I guess, three major things. The steps and creating connections to the sidewalk, the slope or retaining walls between the back of sidewalk and the right-of-way line, and then the driveways. And if you recall, it was a great discussion about the steps and the sloped area, very manageable, and I'm going to show you a few things in a minute. The driveways were a concern just because they're a larger element of the project. We had talked about the fact that we would interface with the various homeowners and show them what the extent of the work was, and that we would have a packet and really the idea is to have a standalone packet for each homeowner. And we recognize it may not be every single property on Harford Avenue, but in the end, it'll be most of them. And I'll go down at some point that's convenient. You know, Frank had said it might be good, maybe go down on a weekend or something. And really the goal here is for me to go down and have a stack of these, what I'm calling design packets. Each one will be customized for each property. Some of them will be extremely simple. So for example, up near the top of Harford Avenue, as we approach the vicinity of the gas station, we know that it's pretty straightforward. 5 Harford Avenue as an example, pretty level topography. We're doing their driveway apron and potentially a really tiny little segment, and that's about it. Pretty simple. Some of the more complex ones that we had talked about, I know we spent a lot of time talking about 27 Harford Avenue, which is really one of the more complex properties. They have 2 driveways, steps going down to an existing walkway, the slope from the sidewalk, and even potentially concrete walkways. So it ranges in complexity. So each property will have its own packet. I will have a full set of the plans so I can show people. And again, this could be individual, this could be a couple of whatever it has to be. I'll show them where they fit in on the project, and then I'll walk through their individual design packet to basically get some answers to the questions that we had talked about. And I'd like to show you that design packet really quick to kind of get your initial read to make sure we're heading in the right direction. The reason this is a pivotal meeting is that if you're okay with the design packet, and I'll send out, right now I have it in pieces, again, a little weird over the doing it this way, but I will send out by the end of the day a full compiled PDF of this. Manager, I'll send it to you so you can forward to everybody. And then, you know, if there's minor comments, you can, but the intent is to get some hard and fast decisions from each of these property owners. If you recall, we had talked about the steps. Would you like steps that are light tan, that have a certain look, brown? And we want to channel the decisions to a very simple set of options that are cost effective. We don't want to give people a wide open design carte blanche, because then they'll be spending your money. So I'd like to show you some of the things that we've developed as far as this packet to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. I thought I would start, if it's okay. I had mentioned a spreadsheet that I'm going to send to you, and it's pretty much done. Jesse and I have a meeting essentially after this meeting to finalize a couple of the properties, but if it's okay, I'm going to share my screen. I won't go through this whole spreadsheet because at this point there's no need to, but if you can see that screen, I'm going to send you this spreadsheet, and I'm going to expand a few little things. Murphy's Law, the more I started typing, the more I wanted to add to it, because it's, in a way, it's my way of communicating with you guys for exactly what's going to happen. So I'm expanding it with a little notes column on the right. And again, I'm sorry, this is kind of jumping around, but I'm going to send this to you. And what this is going to be is the guide that basically dictates what's going to happen at each property in the right of way, and what's going to happen on each property where we have physical work that needs to happen on the actual property. Then what will follow, and I'm going to just share my screen again. I am going to finish up developing this package. And sorry, these things are just taking a little bit of time to open. A lot of these are very large files.
Curt, while that's coming up, is this what you also sent to the building official? I know we got it in a large
link. It's similar, but this is customized for each of the property owners, and I think we would certainly send this to him too.
Okay.
For just for his, since we're working with the property owners. Now, if he says, I don't need to be involved, because then we wouldn't even bother. But if he says, oh yes, I want to be involved, we will get him a packet of each one of these individual property packets. So he sort of has it as a roadmap of exactly what we're doing.
Okay,
so this is, so I use 23 Harford Avenue as kind of an example. So each packet will be customized to the property owner. And then what we will essentially do is include, and again, I'm sorry about the little delays. It just, sometimes these things over the wire. So we'll start off, and think about this in the context of me sitting with each of these people. Oops, here we go. Okay, so for each property, we would give them a little example of, okay, this is your property. This is the work that needs to happen. So they have a little document. This also goes along with, for each property. And again, we won't necessarily need these for every property. Interesting enough, it'll probably be most of them, but you guys may recognize this from, you see that whole page?
Yeah.
So as part of the packet for each property where there's a need to go on their property, this temporary access agreement would be in there. And if you notice, I've included an attachments line. So what I was thinking we would do is, when I meet with these people and we essentially get their buy-in to the various things, we're going to have them check off, and so it's documented those materials will get attached. At least my proposal is we attach those materials to this temporary rights agreement. So there's no question. And you can see here items 1, 2, and 3. I will customize that for each property. And once we've agreed to everything, this would then be used to establish the formal agreement between the property owner and the town. The items in there could be 3, 4, 5 items would directly correspond with what they picked as far as the various options. So then what I would additionally share with them at our meeting, okay, so we talk about, and sorry, these things just take time to load, rather large files. And I'm going to modify these things slightly for presentation purposes. Unfortunately, doing stuff over the screen, it doesn't always look the same to you as it does to me. But here's an example of where we will show people, and every packet will have something like this, where we're basically showing them what the proposed work is. So in this case, grass slope, new steps, and essentially we would be telling them, this is the work that needs to happen. So this is one of the examples of where a grass slope's going to be fine. We don't need a planter. So this would be customized to that particular packet. In other words, this packet wouldn't have the plant, the person would never even see that. They would only see it's going to be a grass slope. We're going to put in steps. Then what we would show them, well, actually, let me show you another example. Okay, so here's an example of where there would be the retaining wall and a planter. So in this particular, and it could be also combinations of different things. So I'm just using these as examples. Each packet will be customized to what's happening at that property. Then once the people understand, this is sort of to just give them the visual. So as I sit with them and I say, yep, you could either have, in this particular case, it would show both the slope and the planter, right? Because the person may say, I don't want a planter, I want a slope. So both of those would be in their packet. Then what we would do at the same meeting, we would I would show them this package. So here's an example of where the person has steps. So can you see that okay?
Yep.
Yep.
So we would tell them, okay, you can pick from 2 options of steps. And last time we had talked about various options for the stairs. We talked about timber stairs. We talked about straight concrete. We talked about granite. Jesse and I have talked, and we feel a few things. We feel, number one, that for steps, we would not recommend any type of timber material. It's very unforgiving because of its nature. It doesn't really afford you much flexibility as far as riser height or those kinds of things. It's not going to last. We have seen, even with pressure treated timbers, and this is in particular with steps, it becomes a safety issue. They do absorb water. They can crack and check. The joints can become displaced, which then can cause problems with continuity of the landing and things like that. If it was, and then if you think about the way timber steps are made, quite often you frame out the step, but then for the actual landing, it will either be stone dust or some people even fill it in with concrete. We can't have stone dust. That would make a mess. It would erode away. Our only other option would be to put something rigid in there. When you start in the New England environment, and particularly in Sound View where it's subject to flooding, freeze thaw, when you start mixing materials like concrete and wood, bad things happen. They have different rates of expansion. You can never seal the seam between the timber and the concrete. And then what happens is through freeze thaw action, you start to heave the concrete portion of the tread. It then becomes, you end up in a situation where there's a differential, and that happens sometimes very quickly, a differential in height between the, say, the 6-inch landscape timber and then the concrete tread. And even a quarter of an inch is a tripping hazard when you're talking about stairs.
Curt,
Yes.
I think you convinced us on that. With respect to the treads, would we would take like the left one, which is the lighter colored? Would we just offer one selection of the material and they could pick different colors of it?
Yes, that's exactly what we're thinking. And again,
This looks like they're two different choices, and what we ought to keep it simple.
Yeah, the photography is a little bit because of the light reflections, but they would be the exact same pattern. Just one is a very light color that approaches.
You're introducing boulders and stuff, so I mean, can you just show them the one set of steps and then different color swatches and not show the other step?
Absolutely, we could. If you think that's the way to go, absolutely. We could use the example of the one on the left and just say, this is the texture and the style. And then on the right, we could literally just say, here's 2 color swatches.
Oh, you got them below.
You got the color swatches below, or for the block wall, they'd be the same.
We could do a similar kind of thing.
Yeah, you don't think the only thing you haven't shown here is the landscape timbers for the planters, though.
So we could absolutely do the swatches if you think that would be best. Glad to do it. So for the walls, we're calling that sidewalk transition. And can you see the whole? Are you able to see that on your screen? Okay. So you can see my little narrative where we're kind of just, and again, I'm assuming all these are going to be little packets stapled together. I am just assuming these people would be taking this packet with them, right? That's my assumption that, of course, if I'm a homeowner, I'm going to say, well, let me take it with me. What I would actually, go ahead, Frank.
It's likely they're going to probably want to think about it a little bit.
Right. Yeah. What I was actually thinking of doing, and I thought about it right before the meeting, and if you guys think it's okay, next to each one of these little options, I was thinking of adding a little box that just says homeowner initials. Right? And then they just initial it. That, okay, this is the color I want. That way there's no hurt feelings later. So here's an example of the wall where I basically tell them you have 2 choices for the wall, either concrete block or timbers. Of the concrete block, here are the 2 color options you have. Initial.
Why do we want to give them choices? Why not just block?
At the last meeting, we had talked about offering 2 different colors to create some variations. We could certainly just say, this is it. I'm happy to do that. It certainly makes things easier. At the last meeting,
I think we did talk about that, and I think giving them some options are not it's not going to really cost us any more or less with options, Tim. So we might as well give them the opportunity to have their say in what they think is going to be best. And I think it'll be easier buy-in that way.
What about, I mean, we're showing timbers here. We just got through a big discussion about how bad timbers are.
Well, in a walkway, in a stairway, because the timbers can shift by a quarter of an inch, but in a landscape timber wall, a quarter of an inch shift, I don't believe is going to be that significant. And I think that am I correct in that, Tim? Of course.
You are correct. Yep.
So the shift in land, and I think the landscape timbers, if it's desired by the homeowner, will certainly soften up the concrete, and I think that might be desirable on some people.
Yeah, and that was a big topic of our discussion last time, that we wanted to give them that other option of something that had a bit more of a residential feel, and we felt that adding the timbers in there as an option was pretty inexpensive. It's similar to the concrete block, where it's all essentially handwork, right? We know that this is probably going to be a crew of just a couple of guys, very low intensity. We won't need to have machinery in front of the person's home, and the landscape timbers are kind of a familiar, fairly common thing that would be just nice to have as another option.
Curt, this is Mary Jo. Would it make sense to, as we're progressing down this option period of time, if we can tell the homeowner what their neighbors' preferences are? It's like, pretty much everybody has opted for the landscape timber option. You can certainly have the other, but just so you know, your neighbors are doing blah, blah, blah.
Great idea. Yeah. And what we could do is similar to the spreadsheet that I showed you. I will have my own spreadsheet to track all these discussions, and I can use that spreadsheet. Heck, we could even show it to people, right? I'll have it down at the community center, and or wherever we meet with, it could be at somebody's kitchen table. Yeah. So as we meet with people, I will populate that spreadsheet. So then very quickly, be able to say, oh, look, everybody around you has picked, the landscape timbers, just so you know. Yeah, we could absolutely do that.
Thank you.
Kurt, do we have a cost differential between the slope with grass and the wall, either be it timber or, the steps, the wall, and I guess the steps on the wall?
Yeah, the straight grass and the steps are almost independent of the planters. So if you recall, we have a few spots where there's steps, but there's just you could just have slope grass. So it's very flexible in that regard. The difference between the slope from the down and a structured planter is probably $5,000 plus or minus. The slope itself is very, very inexpensive, as you might imagine, right? It's essentially going to be 4 inches of topsoil and some grass seed. They may have to put a little bit of jute matting or something on there until the grass comes in, or we could opt to go with sod. I know that sometimes people say, whoa, wait a second, sod is expensive. However, we've actually had a little bit of a change in our philosophy lately between sod and seeding. We have found that even though our contract documents talk about that the contractor is responsible for maintaining everything until the grass gets to a viable, we call it a viable turf stand, it's really hard. Once the project is done, sometimes it becomes really, really difficult to get these guys back when you've got little issues. a little area of runoff. Envision this project happening in the fall. You'll get some initial fall growth, but inevitably they'll have to come back in the spring and do some spot reseeding. We have found that that becomes very, very difficult to do. So in some cases, when you kind of look at that big picture, we've determined that using sod from the get-go, in the end, doesn't really increase your cost that much, because the contractor looks at it as almost a one-time thing, because he can put the sod down, and the day he puts the sod down, it looks great. He's already got that turf stand. The one
It require an awful lot of water to get it.
just going to say, the one caveat with the sod is it absolutely requires watering unless we have a wet fall, which we've had in the past, and sod can do quite well. And then once you hit December 1st, it goes dormant, and it's basically doesn't do much over the winter. So that's something to think about. If you think about seeding, it too, to properly come up, requires darn near just about as much water as sod does. People don't realize that, but you need to maintain that soil in a what we call a borderline saturated condition until you get the initial germination of the seeds. So I look at it as under either scenario, there needs to be some sort of watering, which is in some senses a whole nother issue in and of itself. And we've probably all seen it, where you see a project, contractor does some seeding, and it just it doesn't look good, particularly on the side of the road. In fact, that sidewalk out in Hebron that I was mentioning, they did a bunch of seeding out there, and clearly they've never watered it because they're out on the road. They're out on Route 85. Nobody's ever gone out there to water it. So it's extremely spotty the way the grass has come up.
What about hydro seeding?
It's really not too much different, because all hydro seeding is, it's a seed mixture with a tacking agent, which is basically cellulose. It's recycled newspaper and some fertilizer in it, but it still needs to be watered. It's still,
So it's not a pre-germinated seed?
No, it's, and what they a lot of times will do, if you're not careful, and we would be careful with specifying our mixture, they put a lot of perennial rye in there. So it comes up very quickly, and you get that quick green, but the perennial rye, it does come back every year. It doesn't fill in like your good mixture of Kentucky bluegrass and creeping red fescue that we would specify. Hydro seeding is good for larger areas because of the way it goes down. It's just it's really meant to be a bulk application type thing. For these slopes, hydro seeding could make a mess, right? Especially we've kind of got these small areas.
Right. Well, it's just a thought. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah. And these are great discussions. I want to have everything on the table, because these are the things that we're up against. I suspect this contractor would probably say, I could just do it by hand. It's all handwork. They're small areas. I can put down the jute matting. The watering is certainly an issue, and I don't know if there's necessarily a way around that, right? We could have something in the contract that says the contractor has to supply his own water. And we've actually done that before. And literally what he does, if we have a period where there's no rain, so again, think about this. This will be happening in, well, let's hope late October. Could be early November, and then we're sort of past the end of seeding season, but we've got to seed it anyway. It's highly likely that he will have to stabilize it over the winter and then come back and do it in the spring. that may be a foregone conclusion just because the temperatures won't benefit the growing of grass. But under any scenario, we could absolutely put something in the contract that says, if there isn't rain for X days, and I'll work with Jesse and the landscape architects to define what that is. You need to come and water this grass. And it may literally mean you have to go down there with a water truck. And you've got to reserve in your bid, whatever it may be. You're taking a little bit of a gamble as a contractor. You better factor in maybe a couple of visits with a water truck, almost like you see the trucks with, what is it called? Like chem lawn or green lawn,
There's hydrants. You could always get a hydrant tap too. So that's,
Yeah.
so that's a cheap way to put it, which.
Yep. And if the town's amenable to that, absolutely. We got the 2 hydrants on the street.
Curt, we do have, Public Works has a truck with a big jug on it. If it would save us good money, we could perhaps talk to Public Works about stopping down there every week or something.
Okay. Yeah, and it's interesting, Tim. I really like that idea, and I see that Jesse's on. Jesse, chime in if you want, but we have found getting the contractor, or I should say the contractor's landscape subcontractor, 99.9% of the times they're subcontracting this piece of the work. Getting these folks to come back for this kind of follow-up type stuff is really hard. And it's clearly a pattern that I've seen for years where once they finish the job and they leave, boy, they don't want to come back. They want to move on to the next thing or whatever. So I really like the idea of the owner having some control, because you have the resources, you're right there. You want to see it done right. I'm not saying the contractor doesn't, but again, once they finish the job, it's hard to get them back.
Could we get like an ad alternate to say they would be responsible, but if they wanted to have somebody like the town be responsible, they could give us a deduct for that?
We certainly could. We could say something like a 6-month maintenance period or something like that. Give us a price, and then we've got them contractually. And if they don't perform, then you have the option of saying, well, we're not paying you.
But I mean, if we could save a couple $1,000s by having the truck us do it, and it was a real number, that might, we know what we're saving.
Yes. So we could, in the bid, actually have a breakout number, like you said, an alternate, and we could literally see what it may cost you. The low bid may $1,500, in which case you may say, just have the contractor do it. That's great. Whereas if he says, oh, that's going to be $10,000, well, wait a second. Maybe that's something that the town can do. Again,
how many properties might need the retaining wall total that you think?
Yep. Let me go to my.
What I'm getting at is if we have a bunch of them, that's $5,000 a pop. We might. I think I mentioned last time, we might say to the homeowner, if you want that option, we'll pay for half of it for you, and you have to pay half, something like that. It's $5,000, because if we have like 5 or 6 of them, that's approaching 10% of the project money.
Yeah, that's right. Jesse, do you know how many right now? And remember, the number could be 0, right? People may elect to just have the slope.
Well, if we do it for nothing, if we pay for it, they're going to go for the wall.
You're right. And remember, I think Jim brought it up. The other slight concern was with the slope, water running onto their property. And then we wanted to avoid them coming back saying, hey, You put this thing in, you put this slope, and now water is running onto my property. The good news there is our sidewalk will be pitched at 1.5% towards the road, towards the gutter. The only flow or runoff that they would actually get is literally that rain which falls on this piece. So keep that in mind too. It's not like there's other water coming in from a remote location running down onto it. And remember, this whole sidewalk will now have a nice 6-inch curb, except for the driveways, which will have remember we talked about the 1.5-inch lip. Yeah, right now I'm looking at the chart. I don't think Jesse can hear me.
He's on mute.
Okay.
There he is.
Hey, Jesse. Jesse, do you know about how many properties we were thinking may end up, for lack of a better term, with planters? I'm looking like 5 properties.
That would be the worst case scenario, and I think it really relates to what kind of improvements they have that they want to keep, especially at 27 with the fence.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think a slope, unless they really felt otherwise that they wanted a little wall or not.
You know, the
Well,
other
I think
thing.
to go back to Tim's concern. I mean, it's good to have the homeowner have a little horse in the race, so to speak. And I think that's what you're going at, Tim. And I think that's great. But I'm still, as I proposed in my email last week. I mean, I think the scope of the project where we are today and the costs and what's it costing us, and is $25,000 going to be a significant impact on the overall project, or is it insignificant? I mean, my whole approach here is we need to be able to get Shore Road done. And I don't want to shoot everything on Harford Avenue. We need to be able to get Shore Road down. That's a significant part of this project, and it's a tremendous part of the community support. And if we go in there and say we're only doing Harford Avenue, we've just lost a good portion of our community support, and we don't need any extra aggravation in that. So, you know, I would just as soon look at this thing in an overall approach and figure out what the costs are on each little piece of it and decide where we're going to go with it.
Well, Frank, bear in mind that, you know, this stuff is going to be progressive, because if we have to do their sidewalks to ramp them up to the driveway aprons, and we have to, you know, maybe potentially do the whole sidewalk in front of their house because it doesn't look right. You know, we could be spending serious money on these 5 or 6 properties, and that's subtracting from Shore Road. That's my point.
Yeah, I agree with you.
The homeowners pay for stuff in the way of options, you know, give them the plain vanilla slope. And, I mean, if these properties are receiving water now, our project is going to make less water. And if there's a slope, you could say, well, there's a marginal bit of water, but it's probably a lot better than it was.
Yep. Yeah, I think we will make the situation better than you know, what they have today. One challenge that we will have is convincing some of these homeowners that is true. But I agree, we will definitely be making things better. So sounds like a key item for us is Jesse and I will wrap up the cost estimate, which we have underway. We will get that done. We were kind of thinking, what comes first? Do we wait? So, Frank, I definitely hear what you're saying, and I think it makes sense. Why don't we do the cost estimate? Because we have to have something to base it on. Why don't we do the cost estimate, assuming that there's just the grass slopes, but then we'll have some line items for what the planters cost. You know, we could even talk to some contractors. Then we can sort of see how we plug in these modules, if you will, planter or whatever. And don't forget, the next piece that ties right into this that we, if you recall, we spent a lot of time talking about this last time, was the driveways. Those are the biggest really headaches, because whereas the steps and the planters are kind of standalone elements, right, that could easily be plugged in or not utilized, they're kind of like their own little work item, because these driveways span both the beyond the apron. Now we're down into people's properties, and then all of a sudden, okay, we put the driveway in. What about the edges? It's kind of like that butterfly effect that we talked about. I'm bringing this up because, again, that's a cost item, right? That we are going to be spending money. And also recall, if we had talked about, if someone said, I don't want you coming on my property, we were just going to give them the slope. Let's see. Let me find it. I'll just call it up on my screen to just, okay.
We just talked about a packed gravel slope. I think that's what it was, wasn't it?
Well, if they had a paved driveway, we were just going to pave it. So here's an example of, if these people said, you cannot come on my property, then all we're going to do is create a ramp from the back of sidewalk to the right of way.
Right.
And then I think, Jim, I think it was you, had mentioned something about a concern with some water flowing down this. And yes, that is a concern. But the thinking is, if somebody already has a paved driveway, we probably have to put back what's there.
A quick question, Curt. I realize that a lot of this stuff is adding up, and we have to balance out perception of
Yes.
making their water issues worse. And again, I understand the slope. I understand what we're doing, and I know that we're not going to make the problem worse. But there's the perception issue that we have to balance
Absolutely.
out with a cost issue. So, I'm not beating the drum on needing retaining walls or, special treatments on the aprons. I'm just, concerned about the perception. I'm also concerned when we go onto people's properties, when we're changing the grade, we may create spots where it looks worse, because we're reducing the area where the water can spread. So
I agree.
that's one big concern I have with getting onto people's properties, starting to change those elevations, starting to change sidewalk elevations. There's one of those where we even talked about bringing the sidewalk up to the first step to make sort of a smooth transition from the driveway to the front steps. Well, then that drop off has to come somewhere. It comes right in front of the house, and a lot of those places have crawl spaces. Having had a cottage down here that was simply one of those, like, you had to sneak under it on your belly, type thing to do any plumbing work. When water pools down there, it's not fun. So, my inclination would be to do the least possible. And we have to balance that out with, making sure it's done correctly and the perception problem. Two quick questions. On the preliminary design, the areas of dark black that are on, like, say, number 5, number 7, number 9, number 11, 17, 19, is that new bituminous driveway that we're putting in?
So if you can you see the screen that says property map?
Yep.
23. Okay, so in this particular case, and Jesse, feel free to jump in, please. That's grass paved, like we had talked about, because these folks happen to have a grass driveway. So we'll clarify that on the mapping, so it's very clear. And essentially what you're looking at here, this is a blow up from the design. So it will be this clear on all the plan sheets. This one is nice, large scale, so the property owner really, you know, can see it. And heck, we could give this to the contractor if we need to, but so it does vary. So we actually have 3 materials. We've got bituminous, and by the way, I also have them in the Excel spreadsheet listed out what they are. There's bituminous pavement, grass, and gravel. And if you recall, with the gravel, we had talked about some material to kind of reinforce it so it held on the slope. Some pretty simple little geogrids and whatever we can use. So yeah, looking at 23 Harford Avenue, which is our example for the packet, that would be the reinforced turf.
Okay.
And in this case, you can see we're going, Jesse has calculated it's about a 6 foot, 6 inch extension. You can see the cross section up there at the top, where we've got the existing sidewalk, the bituminous pavement transition section, for lack of a better term, and then the grass pave, where we're picking up and sort of filling in their driveway. And to your point, Jim, keep in mind, and this is why the driveways are giving us such heartburn. If you notice, you can see Jesse has the dashed line on the cross section and then the solid line, which is the new ground surface. Think about at the edges, this needs to be blended in.
Right.
And what we would default to is just loam and seed, right? Some topsoil and some grass, just blended back into their existing grade. No retaining walls or anything like that. If the homeowner wanted to come in later and do that, it's their property. They can do whatever they want. But our proposal would be for this project, we're just blending it back into existing. Now, if a homeowner, once again, if a homeowner says, well, I don't like that, I'm not going to let you do this unless I see something different, that's where I will immediately circle back with the committee and just report back and say, this is what we're getting. And we'll have those discussions as much as we need to. The danger is we don't want to set precedents where all of a sudden, okay, we'll put something in. And then, like, to your point, Mary Jo, they're all going to kind of see what their neighbors are doing. Hey, wait a second. How come he got these little things and I didn't? We really want to stay away from that.
And last question, with the retaining wall cost, $5,000 per property for the retaining wall. Is it significantly cheaper if we just pour concrete as we pour the sidewalk for a retaining wall and not do landscaping but do grass?
Oh, do you mean like a retaining wall that literally just drops down at the edge of the sidewalk?
Right, with no planters, it'll just be,
Yep. And I think Jesse had mentioned at one meeting, you would probably want to put in like a small curb or something, because if somebody goes off the edge,
okay,
it's a liability issue because you're still in the right of way. So
okay.
imagine a family of people walking down the street with all their stuff. You got kids, and somebody falls off the edge of the sidewalk.
Right, so we're pretty much depending on a fence for that not to happen. So 23 we're okay, but maybe a different property we're not okay.
And that's where personally, I'm a huge fan of keep it simple. Less is more,
Right.
relative to your budget, relative to construction. I love the idea of just the grass slope, and that's it.
So maybe we just eliminate the whole retaining wall option. Seems like we're getting into some dicey territory.
We kind of are.
That goes back to, but Jim, that goes back to your perception issue with the retaining wall. The retaining wall, with the planter in it, does give a significant perception that we're making the problem better.
Right.
And once again, I have no problem with the retaining wall or various treatments to the surfaces, as long as it fits into the scope of the project costs. If we're starting to talk $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for planters, I got a real hard time with that. And I think I'd rather go back to Tim's thought and say, look, we're going to get a grass slope here. However, if you want to put a retaining wall, it's cost $5,000 to put the retaining wall. We'll cover half of it. You cover the other half.
Yeah, I'm starting to circle towards that myself, just thinking,
Grass.
yeah, that, you basically, give them a nice picture of what it's going to look like, explain what the slopes are, that we're going to be reducing the overall amount of water coming onto the property because the sidewalk is pitched toward the road, etc. And then kind of in our back pocket, we have this retaining wall option and maybe Tim's 50-50 cost share. We do have to balance perception and cost, so I'm not dogmatic on this one, I'm circling more towards the middle ground here.
This is, I agree with you guys on this. I would just like to see, of those 5 that you thought might need a retaining wall, which one or ones really do. And if that's the case, say it's the Butchers, the number 29. If you would really, really recommend, because we know what their perception is right now, and we promise that we will make it better, maybe there is 1 or 2 properties that we really feel, given their low-lying residences, that it would benefit them to do this.
That was my impression too, walking down there. There's only a couple properties where it's like, wow, this one really is going to give us problems, just because the house itself is so low.
Yeah.
Yep. And here's the Butchers. It's basically, it's right in here.
Yeah.
Right. It's right in here. That's your low-lying area, right, Jesse?
So maybe, can we reduce that, the retaining wall option to just a couple properties that really, have a dramatic slope down to the house?
We could.
It's all
We basically just.
It's all going to be in the eye of the beholder. If the neighbor wants it, they want it.
Yeah.
And we might want to say that if the elevation differential is X, then retaining wall is appropriate. If it's less than X, then and you want a retaining wall or planter, we'll be happy to work with you on the planter. You're going to provide the cost of half of it. We'll do the other half. But I think it all boils down to what the actual numbers are, where we are today, and what the suggested numbers are, with the suggested improvements that Jesse and Curt have been talking about here.
Yeah, Frank, I like that idea of having a defined number, meaning an elevation difference, because if somebody says, hey, wait a second, why didn't I get a wall? We can say, well, we only put walls in where there was an elevation difference of, I'll just use a round number, 2 feet or greater. If it was less than 2 feet, it's just a grass slope. And it's a very defined thing.
And if you still do want it, we'll work with you on that, but you're going to pay a portion of it.
Right. We can definitely we have all the elevation data. We could very quickly look at that. We could even use the 2 feet as just a starting point, right? To look at, and really it's down here, 27, 29, 31. It
gives us a non-arbitrary number for people to look at. It's not subjective on our part. We're using objective numbers.
Yes, I like that a lot. Yeah.
One other minor point. On your map, you have the word grass appear in the middle of the sidewalk in several cases, as opposed to below the sidewalk. It makes it seem like the sidewalk's made out of grass.
What that is that's the underlying existing conditions plan. So we always do our design plans on top of the existing conditions plan. So if you notice, all the new work is in dark and all the existing conditions is in the light gray.
It's just going to create confusion when people are talking about where the sidewalk is.
Well, what we can do is on the individual sheets, we could get rid of that. Sure. Yeah, we definitely don't want to confuse people. So we could get rid of that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
Yep, that's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Use the Mylars here, huh?
So I am very worried about the cost of these, not so much the steps. If let's assume for a second we get rid of the planters, I am concerned about the cost of these driveways because of what's entailed. As you can see here as an example with the example that Jesse has created for 23 Harford Avenue, adding in the bituminous apron, bringing in the fill material, the grass pave, blending in the edges, and then you start multiplying that towards all the driveways that slope down. I'm really worried that we're going to be spending a lot of the budget on this. These
And
types of
you haven't even talked about the owner's sidewalks going parallel to the town sidewalk.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And you'll see that on the spreadsheet. So whereas some of these things, it's not, when you look at them individually, it's a few $1,000s here, a few $1,000s there, but then you start adding it all up. That's what has me really worried. That cumulatively, we're going to spend a lot of money sprinkled along Harford Avenue for what I'll call non-sidewalk elements of the project. And
Can we do the same thing that we're proposing with the slope versus planter? If the elevation differential is X, then we're gonna even it out between your property and the new sidewalk. If it's less than X, we're gonna give you a slope down to existing property. If you want to do beyond that, we'll be happy to, do some sort of cost sharing with you on that.
Yeah,
the same rationale.
Yeah, that may be the way to go. Because again, there's nothing, and I guess this is something that your town attorney could reinforce, but there's no obligation really for the town to provide someone with a connection to the sidewalk on town property.
The sidewalk connection is not the issue, it's the driveway connection. And if you have an existing driveway that's functioning, and all of a sudden the town takes it and makes it non-functioning, then you're creating a problem for the homeowner.
Right.
So I think if we look at and use the same rationale that says, if there's an elevation difference of X, then we're going to take your driveway and blend it into the new sidewalk elevation. If it's less than X, we're going to just give you a slope down to your existing driveway. If, however, you want to, do a more blended procedure, we'll work with you on that, but there's going to be a cost sharing portion to that package.
And specific to the driveways, the town regulation is 5%. And if you remember last meeting, I talked about that's what we based everything on.
Right.
So that was where we kind of got into the quandary of, well, if somebody doesn't allow us on their property, we're just going to put in the bituminous apron similar to what you see here, but it would just slope down to existing right of way.
Are there any that are greater than 5%?
No, right now, Jesse, please correct me if I'm wrong. We have graded all these using that 5% number.
But that requires going onto their property, right?
Correct. So looking at Jesse's cross section as an example, Jesse, are you on? Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, we got bear and cubs roaming the neighborhood, so my dogs are going bonkers.
Oh, a bear sighting?
Yeah, a bear and two cubs have been wandering around here.
Wow. Okay.
So I've been stepping away. That's why I'm not on video.
That's a first for me.
I gotta jump in here, folks. I have to head out. I'm going to try and rejoin the meeting if I have staff at my restaurant when I get there.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Hi, Jim.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Be possible to do these cost analyses on the driveways, the planter, any sidewalk work that would be required on their property to match the driveways and so forth. I mean, it would be interesting to take, if we're only talking 5 of these things, it would be pretty interesting to have you guys show us what the cost would be so that then we know what we're talking about. Because right now we're saying, well, $5,000 for a planter, and we don't know what this other stuff might be. It could be $10,000 or $15,000 a property for the severe ones.
Yes.
And would it be hard to quantify what those variables will cost?
What we can do, and this is something that, unfortunately, when we do cost estimating, it's hard to predict economies of scale, meaning when we do cost estimates, we do it by individual items. We have a unit cost for that item, and then we use the estimated quantity and come up with an extended cost. A contractor tends to look at things a little bit differently because he's looking at how long things will take, what kind of crew we may have. So yes, we can absolutely them accordingly. We tend to be a little bit higher because, as an example, we'll come up with a square foot cost for the retaining walls, and we'll use that number. But a contractor may say, oh, well, on this project, I've got quite a few retaining walls. There's a lot of economy of scale there. I'll have the same crew go through and do it, and the actual cost could be less. But absolutely, we can do those estimates. We can break them out separately as best we can using the quantities and the unit costs, and we can give you those numbers. And we can put those as kind of, like I said before, we'll do the overall estimate assuming it's all just a grass slope. And then we can give you the individual line items, and we can actually do it by property. So then, and I'll use the same summary spreadsheet. And what I'll do is I'll add different columns to that spreadsheet. So in other words, I'll add steps, driveway, so you can see on an individual project basis. And once we have it in Excel, we can manipulate those numbers anyway, meaning we can mix and match, we can pull things out, put things back in, and really see what effect it has on the project. So I can get working on that immediately.
Yeah, because some of them will have double driveways.
That's correct. Yeah, as an example, and you'll notice that on the Excel spreadsheet. So 27, they have 2. This is 19. They have 2. So there's a few of them. I think it was 3 of them. I think 11 has 2. So we can definitely break those out, have them on the spreadsheet as separate line items. And heck, I'll send it, Mary Jo, she can distribute the actual Excel spreadsheet. So you guys can literally edit it and manipulate the numbers to just kind of see what effect pulling things in or dropping things back out has on the overall cost. So we'll get the overall cost estimate wrapped up very quickly here. Once we do that, I'll get the spreadsheet, which will kind of be like an extension of the overall spreadsheet, by property, whereas the overall cost estimate is just by item. I'll create an extension to that is then the same data, for lack of a better term, but by property.
Yeah.
Be really helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, to reiterate, I am quite nervous about what, I'm looking at these plans and I see some of the driveways, and in order to meet that 5% slope, the fill we're bringing in, et cetera, I'm definitely concerned about the cost implications.
Now you mentioned that the town, if you want to be totally antiseptic, the town has no responsibility to do stuff to accommodate steps, driveways, or anything technically. But
I think you don't have an obligation for planters or steps. Driveways, I think you do have an obligation for driveways.
because that would be a good arguing point. If we say we can do your driveway, but the rules say we don't have to do anything else, and that sets the stage. So if we say we're willing to help you, and maybe we can do some cost sharing here and so forth, because then they know in the back of their mind that if I play hardball with the town, it'll just simply say, well, you're asking for the moon and we can't deliver.
Yeah. So can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Looking at 32 Harford Avenue. You can recognize the gravel driveway, and then the house that we always reference with the two driveways with the chain link fence. This is really kind of our worst area. So you can see they have a little concrete walk. You know, right along the lines of what you're saying, Tim. We could say, look, we're not going to build from the sidewalk down to that walkway any infrastructure. You now, if money was, sure, happy to do it. But you're right. In a case like this, look, if you want to extend that sidewalk to the your walkway to the new sidewalk, you can. You go get the right permit through the town building department. But this project is not going to connect. Yeah. Whereas the driveway, because you're not. In that case, I feel, and again, I'm not an attorney. I don't know if it comes into legal issues, but rationalizing it in my head, you're not cutting off someone from their property. Whereas with a driveway, using this as an example, look, this driveway works today. I can get a vehicle in there. It only makes sense that somebody's at this home. Somebody's going to get here by automobile. That's transitional in my mind. We are obligated to maintain a reasonably accessible driveway. It would be a hard argument, you know.
I agree with everything that's been said. I think it just boils down to dollars and cents. If we can, blend in sidewalks and driveways and it all meets the overall budget for the project, great, do it. I think I'm all for it. If we have to start looking at at economies in order to get this project completed, then we start looking at cost sharing options and hey, you're going to get the plain vanilla envelope here, guys. If you want to go beyond that, we'll be happy to work with you. But you're going to have some skin in the game.
Yeah. I agree. I also worry that whatever we do on the right of way, it may come back to us at some point saying, hey, it's on your property, town. You need to repair it, take care of it, whatever, regardless of whether they cost shared with us or not.
Well, don't forget the overall curb appeal of the property has a significant amount to do with the value. And I don't think anybody is going to intentionally want to devalue their property.
Oh, I'm not saying I agree with that, but I think they could equally say, you need to take care of it. It affects my property value. It's on the town right of way.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. You never know. We deal with all sorts of people down there, everywhere. You deal with all sorts of people everywhere, just not down there. But I really think we're going to have to start looking at dollars and cents here because we haven't even talked about Shore Road, And I'll tell you, signage on Shore Road has really got me very concerned. Commercial signage. So, I mean, and if what we do on Harford Avenue is going to affect Shore Road and vice versa, I think we have to start looking at, the overall scope of the project and dollars and cents to where we are now and where we're going is key to me.
And I think that's from the start. We never want to make things worse. We want to make things better. It is a sidewalk project. It's a connection project. Yes, there's a beautification element to it, and we're providing that with the attractive, area by the curbing for their trash bins and the mail. But it never was to increase their property value on their property. And it was always to try and make the budget go as far as possible, which, BSC and all the folks that interviewed with us felt that we would probably have enough to do Shore Road. If not, we will come away at the end of the planning with knowing how much more we need money-wise in order to finish Shore Road. But the desire was, and the agreement, the verbal agreement certainly were that we're pretty confident that we could do it with 400,000. But if
Definitely.
we do individual beautification projects, we're not going to have it. So to do less is more, to not cause any flooding concerns, and to do what we need to do on those properties that we know are flooding now or have water problems now, not flooding, but water problems now, not because of us, because of maybe previous efforts. That's good faith, and that's what we promised from the start.
Well, I think, like I said, Curt, dollars and cents is going to be it. I think, our next conversation really needs to be looking at some hard, cold numbers before we go on to anything else.
So we will immediately jump into the cost estimate, get that wrapped up over the next couple days, get that out to you. I will basically just devote 100% of my time to getting that wrapped up. I'll literally start working on it today. We have the preliminary design as a base. We will assume, for the purposes of the estimate, grass slopes, no steps, and then we will add individual line items. So you can have a total number one, and then total number two, includes whatever, and sort of it'll be because as we talked, one retaining wall, two retaining walls, three retaining walls, there'll be a little bit of key clicking required to kind of have a discussion about it, but that's okay because we'll have the base estimate, and then we can even do things along the lines of, okay, if we only looked at the 3 lowest properties and put retaining walls there, what would that cost? We'll be able to have a number because we'll have all the pieces available to us, and then we'll be able to just start clicking in those numbers to see how the tally keeps growing.
So you're going to base everything off unit-based pricing, which I understand. Yes. With the concrete sidewalk and the patterns and everything else. I understand that everybody likes to be conservative, okay? But I think we're gonna, not only do we need the high price, which is going to be the conservative price, but we need to see a little bit about what the likely price is going to be too.
Absolutely.
And,
yeah.
Conservative price, the high price, high end, low end. It gives us a little bit of a range of looking at it here.
Yeah, totally agree. So we'll start on that immediately. Get that done this week. Like I said, I'll start working on it today. I'll sort of, for the moment, set the homeowner package aside. So I won't send that out yet. I'll focus on because in a way it's all speculative at this point. We'll get the estimate done. And then maybe we can have another meeting. Heck, well, I'll do another meeting this week if you'd like, just to keep it moving forward. But at the very least, I'll send out the spreadsheet. And like I said, I'll send it to you as an Excel spreadsheet so you can start playing around with different numbers.
Are you pricing the driveway ramps? How is the base? I mean, the plain vanilla would be grass slope, no steps. What would the plain vanilla be for the driveway access? Just a bituminous on town property without going onto their property, or would it be going properly into their property to accommodate the 5%?
Yeah. My recommendation would be to go with the 5%. And the reason I say that is it may be a near impossible sell if somebody says, well, I can drive my Honda Accord into my driveway right now with no problems. But now if you just put this ramp section down, now I literally can't get into my driveway without ripping off my front bumper because the slope is so steep. I'm colliding at the bottom of the slope. And that's a very, very common design considerations, which is why a lot of towns,
Okay.
So I don't think with a straight face, we could tell somebody, hey, look, we filled in the missing section.
I'm just trying to get what the base is. So it would be the 5% drive.
I think that should be, yes.
Yeah,
And
that's
we
good.
would match the material that they have there today. And as I mentioned earlier in the call, we have 3 types of materials. We've got grass, bituminous pavement, or I think there's only one that's gravel, maybe 2.
Okay, so that's the base for each property, and then we
Yes.
start moving up the options.
That's right. Everything else is just a grass slope.
And so if they have a concrete walk which approaches the 5% driveway, we may need to accommodate doing something with that sidewalk as it gets to the driveway apron, such as
Yep.
a panel or 2, right?
That's correct. And that really only occurred at 27 Harford Avenue. And the reason that is, they're really the only ones in this low-lying area that have a walkway that directly intersects onto the driveways. Everybody else, there's no walkway. There's one property, 21, has like a gravel walkway, but 27 was the only one that had these formal concrete walkways that intersected the driveway. So I look at that as a good thing. It certainly simplifies the other properties. If you recall, 37 does have a walkway that intersects their driveway, but that walkway, a good portion of it exists in the town's right of way, literally within the footprint of the sidewalk. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut that off and we're going to reconnect them straight out to the sidewalk.
Okay.
So that's a little bit of an oddball situation, but I think what we're doing is going to be, I hope it's well received, because it's, in a way, they're getting a free walkway because the walkway is the new town sidewalk.
Okay, but it makes it easier for us. We know what the base is, and that's, we're doing what we have to do as a town, and then we can see what these costs amount to, and then we can pick and choose based on the money available and stuff.
That's right. And I will include a narrative. I'll do bullets with the cost estimate, so it's very clear the assumptions and such that were made.
Good.
Excellent. Thank you.
So we'll get started on that immediately. We'll get that going. Two other notes. I did hear back actually during this meeting. It was great from Mr. Wayland.
Oh, good.
Yep. And he said that new front steps and entries would require a building permit and a zoning review. The good news is we are not contemplating any wholesale new steps or anything like that. So that's really good. He said the sidewalks leading up to the buildings / front door do not require building permits as they are considered landscaping. So even if we did include walkways like this, it sounds like what he's saying is his department would not be involved in that. It sounds like the sidewalk is exempt from building permits, which we knew, we talked about at the last meeting. So I'm reading this as unless we did something specific to the front steps or front entryway, I'm reading this email as we don't need any approvals through the building department because it's either sidewalk, town right of way, or if we did create the sidewalk connections, he's saying that's considered landscaping and is not subject to building department.
Boy, that was nice that he got back to you so quickly.
Really nice. Yeah. So that's good. I did reach out to Condot District 2 again this morning, having trouble getting a response from them. I will continue to try. I tried getting a hold of them by phone on Friday. Rick Chapman is the gentleman that I'm dealing with. I was not successful in getting a hold of him. I will continue to try to get a hold of him. We are moving the design forward, but I have a few questions for him, and clearly I want to try to get as much of his feedback as we move through the design before we send it off to them. Again, they do sidewalks all the time. Therefore, okay, give me some of the precedent, if you will, the do's and don'ts that we can look out for so we don't spin our wheels.
Curt, is this
If-
Harford Avenue or is it for Boston Post or Shore Road rather?
Just for Shore Road. He will not hold us up at all on Harford Avenue.
If you're still having difficulty with Condot, we might be able to get Devin or Paul to rattle a few cages to get somebody back to you. So, if you're not getting anywhere, yeah, I mean, we could put a call in or Devin Carney or Paul Formica, and see if they can get somebody to respond.
Why don't we do this then? Let's give them till the end of the week. If I don't get a response from them, and I'm going to reach out to them one more time, maybe I'll wait till Thursday morning since I emailed them this morning. We'll give them a second chance this week. If we don't hear back from them, close of business Friday, maybe it's time to bring a little extra heat, like you said. I just want to have a phone call.
No, I agree. I mean, not that we want to throw up red flags and everything, but sometimes it takes a little nudge. Just a little nudge. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a town project. They're the state. Come on, we all want to work harmoniously, and we're looking for your feedback on some things, and it's a good project. Can we all please work together here? Yeah. Okay, so we'll do that. We'll give them by the end of the week, and then we'll ratchet things up. I also did reach out to Connecticut Water Company, their project manager, just waiting to hear back from him. Basically indicated as we're solidifying the designs on Harford Avenue, wanted to talk about the 2 fire hydrants to find out what their plans are and give them the option of modifying their location if they felt it was warranted. They may say, no, we want to keep them, fine. but just to fully understand that I can report back to the committee kind of what they said. And if we felt that for one reason or another, we did want to have those hydrants relocated, we could always have that conversation. So I'll give him a couple days. If I don't hear from him, I'll reach out again.
Curt, I understand Connecticut Water will be working south of 156 up through June, I think it's 17th or 19th, at which point then they're going to go across 156 and start working on the northern part. So it might be something that needs to be resolved before the middle of June here.
Okay.
They will
So
be, after Labor Day, they'll have more time to come back south of 156, but depending on what timing might be on Harford Avenue.
Okay. Okay.
Tricky.
So they've restarted then.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, they're I just drove out this morning. They're pretty much done with Portland and Swan, Tim, and they're just
Okay,
right down.
okay.
They're right down to the end of Pond Road now. I think that they'll probably be moving up to 156 sooner rather than later.
All right. So the gentleman that I reached out to, I'm just opening up my project contact sheet here.
Is it Dan Leswinski or something like that? Lesneski?
Dwayne, yeah, I left him a voicemail. If we need to reach out to Dan, if I don't hear back from Dwayne's the project manager. It sounded like he was the guy that would really know. I'll use Daniel as a backup, and then as my third backup, Don Snyder from Snyder Engineering. If these guys don't get back to me, I know he's their designer. He's out of Marlboro.
Right.
So I'm really hoping Dwayne gets back to me as the project manager or a project engineer. I'm sorry. Hopefully he has this stuff at his fingertips, and because he's with Connecticut Water, can make some decisions. I suspect that Don Snyder may say, "Well, I don't know. It's up to Connecticut Water. It's their hydrant." And again, this was to address the elevation issues that we don't want to cause any issues. Now, if we go with just the grass slopes, theoretically, the hydrants could stay right where they are in every sense of the word. So it's not like it's going to hold something up. Well, that's all I had then. I'm pretty clear on what I need to do. And like I said, I'll get started on that immediately, get that done in the next couple days, sent out to everybody. And then if we can or would like to, I'm absolutely happy to have another meeting this week, Friday to go over that. And it's not something we have to answer now, but just letting you know that I'll make myself available as needed.
Okay, thank you. Frank, I know you're concerned about the signage on 156.
Yeah, I think that could be another problem.
So what information, since Curt's reaching out to ConnDOT now, do we need him to follow up on that with them for our next discussion?
Well, here are my concerns, Curt. Jump in, but number one, much of the signage on 156 is on the state right of way, and it's going to have to be moved. What's the precedent for that? Is the precedent in that the town actually moves the existing signage, or can we offer the property owner a stipend and allow them to move the signage themselves? And then the next question that needs to be resolved is if they do, when the signage does get moved, is it grandfathered in, or will it have to be in accordance with the zoning regulations? As much of that signage is not inconsistent with our zoning regulations in terms of square footage. So that's the next question that has to be answered. So if we move Teddy's sign, which is probably, larger than he should have for his business, we move it in 20 feet. okay, does that mean he has to change his sign to be consistent with the new zoning regulations? Because there's a significant modification to the sign location and or change. So those are questions that I don't have answers to. Personally, I'd rather say, you know, we're going to give each property owner a stipend, move your own sign, do whatever you want with it. That kind of gets us out of that package. But I guess the zoning is the next question I would have.
The other issue, Frank, we talked about this a little bit at a previous meeting, right along the lines of the zoning issues. Some of those signs have lights on them, as an example. So are the electrical systems that feed those lights code compliant? Why is that important? Well, anytime you touch something, and we've run into this on projects before where it's kind of caused some surprises, something that seemed very simple, all of a sudden, well, now that you're touching the system, the whole system needs to be brought up to code. So
that's why I'm inclined to say, here's a stipend, move your own sign.
Yeah, you know, we ran into that up at UConn. We literally were adding 2 light poles, but the code review folks said, well, the existing system doesn't have a ground. It's direct bury wire, which is not code compliant the way it's configured. If you touch any part of it, the entire loop needs to be brought up to code. Now, ultimately, they elected to do it, but it was another, you know, $70,000 that they said, oh boy, it looks like this project just took on a whole different. But the codes are absolute. So yeah, that's a huge concern for me. When I did talk to Rick Chapman at DOT, and we ran into this before too, the DOT takes the approach. Now, this is when it's their project, so you know, a little bit of a distinction there, but the DOT takes the approach. If it's within our right of way, we don't want to deal with it. We'll take it out and we'll lean it up against the side of your building, but we're ripping everything out and we're coming through. That's it. We don't even want to talk to you. As these guys have mentioned, if we wanted to, we could strip everything out and pave right up to the edge of our right of way. It's our land. It's our property. We could do that if we want. So they take a very black and white approach to it. And I guess they have to in their line of work, right? Yeah.
Heavy-handed. They don't have to see these people on a
day-to-day basis.
Right. We have to see these people on a day-to-day basis.
That's right. You got to see them in the grocery store, and yeah, and that's why he said
the most expensive pizza you've ever had.
Yeah. And that's why he made a point of saying, "Look, Curt, you got to understand when it comes to some of these properties where there's these big open driveways that we will not allow." You've got to include in the design, putting in new curb cuts, et cetera, which we have. He said, I want to make it very clear that if you get pushback from business owners, and he kind of laughed, he said, and you will, and I believe it, we've run into this before. He said, DOT will not participate in the discussions. He said, it is up to the town. He said, we have gotten to the point where we've pulled back because with a lot of these, whether it's a lot SIP project, connectivity project, or other projects, streetscapes, he said the towns didn't want to engage the property owners. They kept saying, well, you got to talk to DOT. And he said, in a sense, they sort of threw it all on us. And he said, no. It's a town project. It's up to the town. So he was very adamant about pointing this out to me. And to your point, Frank, you have to see these people. It is the town of Old Lyme. DOT is just writing the check, if you will. So
we only have really 4 signs that we're dealing with here.
Yeah. But even driveway cuts and the whole.
And 3 of them are real, and the other one is Dimitri's. I'm not sure what that is, but so we're really only talking 3 real businesses. So, and I think we can work that out. But we just gonna have to be aware of that and cognizant of that as we're looking at this thing. The driveway cut's another issue. The old Pizza Plus or Neely's or whatever they call it, that's gonna be the big issue there, how they handle that.
Yeah, some of these people will be very concerned about it. It always happens. We run into this on every project where we're closing off these big, wide open no man's lands, as we call them. People get very concerned. And some of these properties, with the way it affects the turning. Now, we have looked at that as we're laying out these curb cuts. We have looked at turning movements and those kinds of things. But inevitably, we should be prepared to deal with the fact that it's a mass balance. By putting in these curb cuts, we absolutely will be reducing some of the parking. Now, I put an asterisk next to that because that comes along the lines of, well, just because you can physically fit some automobiles in there does not mean it's right, right? So somebody may say, well, heck, I can squeeze 15 cars into my lot. Yes, theoretically you can, but it's extremely dangerous. You've got people parked across the right of, you know what I mean? But the delivery is going to be a tough one where just because there's that one property as we approach, I can't remember what road it was, where I showed the picture to Rick from DOT. He said, oh God, I hate to see that kind of stuff where they're parked perpendicular to the road right across the right of way. And he said, no. We can't have that. I said, oh no, I understand. I understand. I said, we're just going to have to inform these people and they're going to see it. He goes, well, that's where, again, you can't throw DOT under the bus. It's going to be, you know. So anyway, yeah, the delivery is going to be important too. So that's something that we definitely will have to approach very delicately. And so we're in the process of wrapping up the preliminary design for Route 156, and we'll be able to start having those conversations pretty quickly here next week about, okay, let's take a look at the individual curb cuts and those kinds of things. And again, we're going to finish up the design whether I hear back from DOT or not. We at least have to get, because I want to get a submittal into them. So we're not going to wait for them.
And you did say that the preliminary design for 156 is very close to the final design.
It really is, in my opinion.
For those people that are still on the line, Eric, Frank, Tim, would you like to meet with BSC this week or would you like to meet next week?
I can't do Friday. I could do Thursday. But I can't do Friday.
I mean, if to give Curt and those guys enough time,
Yeah.
why don't we plan for next week then and instead of trying to rush to get it done by Thursday and then, it's not done. Give them some ample time to get real good numbers together so we can have a good discussion about it.
That makes sense to me too.
Yeah, you guys work it out, and whatever time, day and time it is, I will be there.
Frank, if Monday or Tuesday, Monday?
Monday's better. Yeah, 1 o'clock is good for me. I like that time. It fits with everybody else.
How about you, Eric?
Yeah, that works.
I can make that at 1. Is that okay with you, Tim?
Monday works, yeah. We have a 4 o'clock, so we'll have to keep it a little shorter than maybe.
Right. Okay. All right. I will put
Monday
that
at
out.
1 o'clock?
We'll put that out in the minutes Monday at 1 to review the numbers. And if we have to cancel because we have a board of select or end it early because we have a board of selectmen meeting, we may have to meet again on, well, I couldn't be Tuesday, later in that week so that we have enough time to legally get out a request for a meeting.
There was conversation about a public hearing in June. Is that not likely not to happen?
First of all, it's not a hearing. It was going to be a community information session. At this point, I'm beginning to think June is not going to happen though, because here we are, June 8th.
Yeah.
I think we have 2 or 3 more weeks of massaging this thing before we can go into any kind of public hearing. I mean, our public meeting, I think we need to go into the public informational meeting with a pretty much fait accompli. I do not want to go in with little bits and pieces. I prefer not to have anything open for question.
Yeah, because you only at this point, all you can do would be Sound View, and that's not even a given. I mean, Harford Ave.
And as I said earlier, much of the support we've gotten for this project has been the fact that they're putting sidewalks on 156. And that support is coming from beyond the Soundview area, which I think is incredibly important for us as a community, that we have a strong support network beyond just the Soundview area for those sidewalks on 156. And I think that needs to be an integral part of our presentation.
Okay, so just go on, just the planning purposes.
I mean, I think that it's better to take the time up front than rush it. And obviously, it's very fair to say, we've had some delays that are unexpected for everybody. So it takes more time. It takes more time. And hopefully, in the meantime, if Curt, we decide we need to request an extension on the construction grant itself, maybe we'll be able to get that from Craig.
Yes.
We're within our timeline for the construction, I believe. Aren't we?
Let me open up the schedule. I think we are still doing okay. Bear with me. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so I'm looking at our schedule now. Well, I can actually share my screen, and I apologize. I accidentally opened up the one from the last time, but it's the same schedule. I just moved the arrows. Okay, so today is 6/8, so this is week ending 6/12. So we're right here at my cursor. So we had final design being done, basically week ending July 3. So we basically have 5 weeks left. We're okay. If we put it into, if we slip a week, one of the reasons that I had the construction documents kind of broken out was to give DOT time for their review. Remember, they have to review the final design. And this is even for Harford Avenue. It's just as part of the connectivity grant. I don't know how they don't do a review like they did on the first part of the project, because this truly is a town project. But that being said, I just don't know. I just don't know what their time frame is. It's a big unknown. I hate saying that, but unfortunately, we've lived it. It's just an unknown.
Yeah. Well, that's good, but again, I just feel like we need to take this extra time to get it right. We'll be strong. Along the same lines, Bonnie, although she couldn't join us, sent a suggested letter in particular to the folks at 31, and I'll just read it to you because I just pulled it off my email, but I thought it was a good general message as we're putting the individual property owners' concerns down. She wrote or suggested, dear property owners, thank you for your letter regarding the planned sidewalk on Hartford Avenue. We have shared your concerns with the entire grant committee for review, along with other comments that we have received from residents. In your letter, you expressed concern that the sidewalk would encourage more people to come to Soundview. Please be assured that the installation of a sidewalk is being completed for public safety, as we have seen over the past many years. People walk on Hartford Avenue rather than on the right-of-way within the grass area. In addition, there was consensus from business on Route 156 at the head of Hartford Avenue that connecting the beach to their business would be a positive change. In regards to the financing of the project, it is important to note that the grant was given specifically for this connectivity project. So spending it on other items, such as tearing down blighted buildings, would not be an option, nor would the town be funding the tearing down of blighted buildings. Lastly, the construction of the sidewalk would be fully within the town's right-of-way and would not encroach upon the property of Hartford Avenue residents. Thank you again. So I thought it was a good summary as we're planning for our individual property owner outreach.
Well, I mean, that might be a good letter to respond back to that, and then we should just pick out some talking points so that when we do get questions, we have, pretty much standard talking points to go towards.
Agreed.
Maybe if you could send that out, we could agree to that letter next week, because we don't have Jim Lampost and
We don't have to agree to it at all, but Bonnie was just suggesting it.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to have to be addressed at some point. I just thought the point she made and then the way she made it made a lot of sense.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay. All right, so we will see everybody next Monday at 1.
Sounds good. I'm assuming Michelle will send out an invite.
I'll ask Michelle to do that and thank her again. Can I have a motion to, first of all, is there any public there? Seeing none, move on to a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
You can have it, Eric. I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
All right.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Curt and Jesse, once again.
Thank you very much.
By the way, I thought, as an aside, it was really cool to watch the process of the work on the tennis courts. It was really, really cool. Nice job on that. I got to meet
Rachel said she saw you. Yeah. She was really happy that she was able to meet your daughter, and that you guys were able to see it. So the fact that she's a tennis player and that was her high school, pretty good stuff.
Yeah, it was. It was really eye-opening too to see how it's done now. So really cool.
Right. Yeah, and hopefully she, maybe it gave her some just motivation as far as being an engineer and some real world stuff. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, they've been home with mom and dad. So thanks a lot. Take care, everybody.
All right, everybody.
Bye.
Talk to you on Monday.
See you all later. Bye now.
Bye.